All right. Good evening, everyone. It being 6 o'clock, I'll declare open the August 26th Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadandi people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 8 councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Clues is on a leave of absence. There is no response to previous public questions taken on notice, so we move to public question time. First question I have is from Mr. Alan Scott. If you'd like to just go to the lectern there and... If you just state your name and locality for the record, please.
Alan Scott, I live in Anderson Road, Capel. Good evening to all. I'm here basically to point out a few issues around the Capel vicinity, town and area, like verges that need to be whippersnip mowed, like the kids' playground. There's two things that are missing, and there's one thing that needs to be repaired. There was issue the other day about glass at the back. My grandkid could have cut himself, but I reported that in the afternoon to the Capel Shire. Other things like I'd be interested in, or your comments, is beautifying Forest Road, main road. You have the Capel Shire offices here, like putting colour in, plants, maybe small trees with colourful leaves, like Donnybrook, Nana, putting plant boxes in. There are a lot of other things I could talk about, but it was in that email I said to you. I just think there's small things that need to be attended to, especially Forest Road. I just think Forest Road should be beautified a bit more than it is, all the way down. And another point is that the heavy trucks that go down here is becoming a bit of a safety issue, possibly with children, elderly people crossing the road, and also the bridge. You had to have stanchions put in to strengthen it, and I think getting the heavy traffic away from there would help that cause. Sure. Divert them down Spur Road to Bustle and then up that way to go to Boyna. They're the small issues that I'm pointing out to you.
Sure.
That's in the email I sent on Monday.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Scott, and thank you for submitting those.
Okay.
I'll address the points individually as you raised in your email.
Yeah, would you?
Yes. So the first point you made, the heavy trucks using Forest Road.
Yep.
The section of Forest Road through Capel, from the corner of Capel Drive and the corner of Hutton Road by the Capel RSL building, is under the care and control of Main Roads WA. Main Roads WA Heavy Vehicle Services have licensed this road to allow restricted access vehicles, or RAVs. Specifically in this case, tandem drive in-floor classification, which allows the use of a prime mover towing 2 trailers. The overall maximum length of these combinations is limited to 27.5 metres long and up to 99 tonnes. Any RAV vehicle up to and including the tandem drive N4 or any as-of-right vehicle, single semi-trailer or rigid truck, can access this section of road at any time of day or night. Main Roads WA High Vehicle Services is the sole decision maker for licensing of roads on the RAV network. Where residents have concerns about driver behaviour, they are advised to report these directly to the police or alternatively through Main Roads WA Heavy Vehicle Services Division. The maintenance of the kids' playground and skate park. Once the Shire became aware of the damage, our regular contractor was contacted and either replace or repair the damaged trampoline. Unfortunately, the contractor advised that this brand of trampoline is no longer available. Given the value of the replacement, the Shire has sought 3 quotes for a replacement. The purchase contract was issued this week, however, due to supply issues, it may be up to 8 weeks before a replacement trampoline can be delivered and installed. In regards to the glass that you've found, if in the future you come across that, please just report it to the Shire
well,
through our number.
We do. I do.
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Verge park and maintenance this year has presented significant challenges with weed growth and maintaining verges and parks. Due to the additional rain, resourcing, equipment challenges and a safety focus on our weed spraying program, areas are looking less cared for than we would like. A contractor has been engaged to support our workforce in order to catch up. Because of the reasons outlined, the Shire is behind in our weed spraying and maintenance programs, with our parks and gardens not being presented to their usual standard. Shire staff have prioritised their focus on shared school ovals during the school holidays, and this is the only time that sort of maintenance can occur. Once that work was complete, the Shire's focus then returned to our parkland and verge areas. And in regards to Forest Road, we currently have no plans to landscape the CBD streetscape in Capel town site.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Mike Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Norton, Chairman of Vasson WA Farmers, beef and sheep beef and wool producers at Capel and Boyabrook Shires. My question in relation again to the Boynup sale yards. Has the Boynup sale yard lease agreement between the Capel Shire and Walser been signed at this point? And if not, what are the key hold-ups to not facilitating the signing of the lease and the sale yard upgrades that are urgently required before the onset of the summer period? That's the first question.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Norton. The lease agreement between Walser and the Shire of Capel has not yet been executed. Walser are required to negotiate with and submit to the Shire's satisfaction capital upgrade and operational management plans as conditions set by the Council prior to executing the new lease agreement. Walser have provided the Shire with all but one operational management plan and continue to work with the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation on the remaining water and effluent management plan. All draft management plans received by the Shire have been referred to the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development for review and comment. Given this water and effluent management plan will eventually be subject to a Department of Water licence, this outstanding plan will not stop the lease from being signed. In terms of capital upgrade plans, Walser have recently provided a draft concept master plan, are working with the Department of Transport and ARC regarding capital upgrades in the rail reserve. Yeah, sorry, your second question.
Okay, well, bearing in mind the lease was supposed to be signed on the 1st of July, then the 1st of September, it could be a long time. So if the Capel Shire is unable to secure a satisfactory lease agreement with Walser covering animal welfare, effluent management, sale yard staff welfare and traffic management safety in a reasonable amount of time, what's the Capel Shire's fallback position or plan B? And what do you blokes consider to be a reasonable amount of time? How many years?
The Shire is confident the conditions to sign the new lease will occur in the next month and the fallback position will not be needed. From there, both Walser and the Shire will be able to confidently inform everyone of the timing of capital upgrades. Importantly, the application of improved operational practices has already occurred. Walser have already made significant changes to their operations to improve animal welfare, staff, workplace health and safety, and traffic management that includes earlier sales time to avoid the hottest part of the day, reduced pen stocking rates, data loggers in pens to monitor heat, upgrade access to drinking water for animals, stock inspectors and agency officers are in attendance at each sale, new ablutions for staff and customers, and improved traffic management through the separation of trucks and vehicles, as well as the closure of an internal road to local traffic.
That's all very good, but that's not what we're hearing on the ground. Now, I'll leave that with you. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Dr. Don Finlay.
Sorry, I guess that didn't get put up on the agenda. It's late coming in. My question, Don Finlay, veterinarian, Boynup and West Coast area. I take into account your reply to Mr. Norton. and as he said, we'll wait and see. I would take some issue on stocking rates that you say have been changed there, and Mr. Norton says not seeing it on the ground, and he's correct. So the future of better cattle welfare in the Boyne-up sales yards mainly rests with the operator and owner of that infrastructure. Why can your Shire not ask Walsa representatives to come to the November Shire Council meeting to disclose to your ratepayers the capital improvement plan?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Finlay, for the question. I'll probably refer to my previous answer to Mr. Mike Norton regarding those capital upgrades plans that have been provided and some of the initiatives that have already been taken. We do endeavour to, in the future, once the lease is signed, to be able to make a public announcement regarding that. But in addition to that, all capital upgrade plans requiring development approval will be required to be advertised publicly. So there will also be a public advertising period, as well as any release that the Shire puts out with Walsa.
Okay, then Mr. Norton has come here for decades about some of the issues with the sale yards, and together I happen to be at the same meetings as him since about February, and the 900-pound gorilla in the room is Walsa, and basically you're entering a corporate agreement with them, and it involves north of $100 million worth of cattle sales. And why you should bear the brunt of all of our questions, I do feel for your position that we're pressing and pressing and pressing because we want changes. That's my comment. Second question, where is the town of Boyne boundary in regards to the South Trigwell Road and those sales yards?
I'll probably have to take that question on notice. I wouldn't want to answer off the top of my head and give you an incorrect answer, so we'll take that on notice and provide you a response.
The question is prompted by something that Mr. Norton mentioned months ago regarding national livestock sale yard codes, and that is a sales yard within an urban environment. There's so many trick ponies hanging around this whole issue that it could fall on its face, and that's a fairly significant one if there's future legislation in 3 years that says it can't be there anymore. Just saying.
Yeah, so that's why we've as part of also engaging these lease negotiations, which we are hoping to have a new site within the 10-year expiry of the current lease, we're undertaking a site identification process. So that's already been budgeted for in this year's Shire budget. So that process will begin shortly, which will look at future sites for a sale yard outside of the Boyne-up town site, yet still within the Shire of Capel, as well as identify any opportunities and constraints around that. So that's our next step. We're moving forward to get the sale yards out of the town site, yet we're also providing that surety for the southwest livestock industry going forward that they can still operate through the Boyne-up sale yards until such time a facility exists.
Okay, I would add that the other smaller gorilla in the room is DPIRD and
Sure.
enforcement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Finlay. All right, there are no further questions on notice. Are there any questions from the floor?
Can I have another crack, Mr. Chairman?
I've just seen another hand go up, so I'll... You're happy, yep, Mr. Norton, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, well, gazetted town site was the terminology. You can't build a sale yard within a gazetted town site. So the question of the town boundary is pretty relevant. But you know, my previous roles, I was involved with the state sale yard management process, which started back in Ernie Bridges' day. I'm not sure who was the premier at that stage, but this sale yard issue started way back in Ernie Bridges' day. Then, when Richard Court took over, it was Monty House, and Monty House sort of spent more money on Midland. And then he moved on. Then Kim Chance was the next minister, and it wasn't until we got Colin Barnett that we actually, and I think the thing that drove it was that Midland Redevelopment Authority wanted that old sale yard site. So these things don't happen overnight. I hate to tell you how many reviews and how many trips east we were, and there was committees looking at sites all around Perth from Northern to Mewshay. And I wish you well, Mr. Chairman, when you start looking at sites, because everybody and his dog will come out of the woodwork saying this is the best site and where you should do it. And the South West Development Commission looked at the old mine site just north of Dardanup, but we sort of knocked that one on the head. So finding a site is not going to be easy, and you're not going to do it in 5 minutes. I'll give you the tip on that, having had the bitter experience. And the only one that was quick and effective was the Capel Shire. So I don't think you're going to be able to do this quickly. What's your process to identify a site? Now, I'm told by some of your councillors that you have some sites that you've got in the back of your mind. Are you going to have a public debate on that, or put them out for public question, apart from the sale yard lease? Because I think it's going to be you're going to have some issues, Mr. Chairman, trying to find a site and getting universal agreement.
We'll work with the existing operator as well as other industry stakeholders and the Department of Primary Industry and Regional Development through a consultant who specialises in these sorts of things to find a suitable location within the Shire of Capel. Are there any other questions? Ms. Gibbings?
My question is in relation to something that's on tonight's agenda, the priority agricultural and intensive farming. I would like to know why the Donnybrook Shire was not involved as an investigation site to determine, to find out their information as well, please. Busselton and Dardanup, I remember, were, but not Donnybrook, which is also a neighbouring shire. Thank you.
Sure. We'll take that question on notice
Thank
to give
you
you a proper answer. Mr. Payne? Yep.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity. Yesterday we had a DAP meeting that approved the Kingston Rest feedlot. 2 years ago, Alan Garston and Matthew Garston visited me at home and presented their initial consultation, if you like. They said with this feedlot, all sheep would be removed from outside of the sheds. The only sheep would be in the sheds. Yesterday we learnt in the JDAP meeting there is going to be 20,000 sheep on the farm outside of the sheds. I'd like to know when the Shire, or if the Shire, knew about this before yesterday.
Sure. We'll take that question on notice, Mr. Payne.
Thank you.
Are there any further public questions? Yes, Ms. Brown?
Thank you for allowing questions without notice. Two questions this evening on behalf of Michael Titchbottom concerning the request to approve Lot 2 Callinup Road and the amendment specifically in Condition R to extract to a 1 in 4 batter. Condition R in this evening's agenda states, minimum batter slopes of 1 in 4 shall be applied to all rehabilitation slopes. Michael refers you to his email correspondence to the Shire's Planning Department on 19th of January 2022, prior to the first SAT hearing. It sets out his historical knowledge and scanned information from 1999, where the EPA conducted a public environmental review refusing a 1 in 4 batter. Even though this was in 1999, we can imagine the amount of research and work that went into this review. It's my understanding that the application to excavate to a 1 in 4 batter was refused by the councillors at the December 2021 meeting, but it has been before the SAT and is now back here for further consideration this evening. As mentioned, the EPA conducted a public environmental review in 1999 which clearly sets out that a 1 in 4 batter is not sustainable, and specifically refer you to attachment 3, item 3.2.1. It says, back in 1999, the Shire of Capel local laws for extractive industries have no such clause relating to batters, and council staff certainly don't advocate 1 in 4 batters as being sustainable. The previously excavated areas north of Callinup Road are a prime example of problem batter slopes and poor rehabilitation methods, and this must not be duplicated to the south." End quote. If the councillors are unaware of this specific issue, I'm asking that this matter be refused or at least deferred until a full assessment of the original public environmental review can be considered, and the opposition from the Shire to a 1 in 4 batter back then and in December 2021 can be further considered. The questions are, can the Shire provide examples of where a 1 in 4 batter rehabilitation in a sand pit has been successful in this Shire? A second question, will the councillors please consider refusing this request based on condition R and not allow excavation down to a 1 in 4 batter slope because previous rehabilitation examples have been described as poor? I'm respectful that this matter has now been before the SAT several times for mediation. However, I remain concerned as I was in 1999, and in my opinion, the 1 in 4 batter should be refused. Thank you for your time to consider this historical but relevant environmental matter.
Sure, thank you, Mrs. Brown. The first question regarding successful outcomes in 1 and 4, we'll take that on notice. The second question I'll probably take more as a comment, and that's for councillors to also receive how they wish. Thank you. Are there any further questions from the public? No? All right, we'll move on. All right, item 5, applications for a leave of absence. Are there any requests? Councillor Tarrant-Troy?
For the December Ordinary Council meeting, please.
Any other councillors requesting leave? No, can I have a mover for that leave? Councillor McCleary, seconder. Councillor Sciano. Any discussion? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Declarations of interest. Got one from myself in relation to item 14.4, tender 22/10 Bourne-up West Road, a proximity interest. Item 7, notice of items to be discussed behind closed doors. We have one item this evening, 20.1, consideration of prosecution for breaching of Planning Act and extractive industry local law. We have to now move to item 8.1, the confirmation of the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting 28th of September 2022. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Tarrant-Troy. Any discussion on those minutes? No. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. There are no announcements by the presiding person, so we move to item 10, petitions, deputations and presentations. We have a presentation this evening from Daniel Lewis of Element WA on item 14.3, amendment to existing extractive industry, Lot 2, Callinup Road, Julurup.
Now it's on. All good. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to address you again this evening on the item 14.3 of tonight's agenda, the amendment to the approved extractive industry at Lot 2, Callinup Road, Julurup. My name is Daniel Lewis, a planning consultant at Element, and here on behalf of McDougall Quarries, the landowner of Lot 2, Callinup Road. I'm here to speak in support of the officer's recommendation for approval presented to council tonight. Councillors, as we all know, existing sand extraction on site continues to operate daily under the existing approval and licence granted by the Shire, enabling the supply of sand to various infrastructure and development projects within the locality, including, for example, bustle highway duplication. It is also very well known, and we talked about this at the end of last year as well, that sand resources within the Shire have and will continue to be depleted over in the next few years due to recent regional demand by infrastructure and development projects. Support for the officer's recommendation will assist in some way in alleviating the market demand for sand in the region, while ensuring the site is appropriately rehabilitated to native vegetation following extraction. In closing, I'd particularly like to thank the Shire's technical staff and environmental consultant Syrinx, who together have worked in a positive way over the past 10 months during mediation. As a result, you councillors tonight have a comprehensive and peer-reviewed rehabilitation implementation plan of note and of a quality that hasn't been seen before and is leading in this regard, and also an amended bonding rate presented tonight that both the Shire officers and Syrinx are in support of. Both Shire officers and our consultant team consider the RIP, as we term it, the Rehabilitation Implementation Plan, and the bonding rates to appropriately address any previous concerns raised by Council in December. We therefore do not see any reason for Council to not support the officer's recommendation presented tonight, and wish to personally thank the Shire staff for their professionalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Apologies, we have a few technical issues this evening. Now move to item 11, motions of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Item 12, questions of which previous notice has been given. There are none as well. We now move to 13.1, Chief Executive Officer reports, the reviewed communications and social media policy. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Sciano. A seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm actually going to move to defer this item, and I just need to confirm the exact. Okay, I won't move it then. Well, I won't be moving to defer it, but I'll use the opportunity while I have it to speak on the item.
The mover and seconder can't move a deferral. Yeah. Sorry? He can still speak to the item. Yes, yeah. The Councillor Sciano has the call.
Yep. Look, I'm not going to spend too much time speaking on this at the moment, but I hear that some concerns around the contents of the communication policy. I perhaps don't have any major concerns of much with the content. However, I think there are some issues around. So there are some items in here, and the way that it's been presented that potentially causes some issues with the numbering and a few other issues in there as well. I'm not going to say anything else on that.
Councillor Territory?
I reserve my right to speak on this matter later.
Are there any speakers against Councillor Noonan? Yep. Do you need December? Councillor, can I please get you to repeat with the microphone on? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor McCleary? Does the member wish to speak to the deferral? No? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 13.2, the corporate business plan. Oop, where have I gone? Sorry, no, I'm not right. 13.2, the corporate business plan 2022 to 2026, first quarter reporting from July to September 2022. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the motion as read. It's quite a decent report, and it's progressing towards the corporate business plan.
Thank you. Councillor Mogg. Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Councillor McCleary, you wish to close? No. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Now move to infrastructure and development reports. 14.1, display home centre, lots 31 to 38 and 50 to 53, Atkins Road, and lot 69, Jargon Approach, Dalyellop. Is there a mover for that officer's recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the motion as read. It's something we haven't done in the past, but there's been a lot of display homes that are set up in Dalyellop and other places. There's some interesting guidelines and stuff that have been addressed in this motion to cover off car parks and access to the homes while they're on display. These homes eventually become part of the community and they're finished with at the end, so I'm not really seeing any issues with this. It might be people nearby with the car parks or something like that. They're normally in a new development area so people can see the product that they want to buy later on. So yeah, look, it's a good motion, good action by the staff in developing this strategy.
Councillor Mogg. Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absolutely have no objections to a display home centre in Dalyellop at all. I raised during briefing last week just some issues around identifying it as a use not listed. I mean, it's not typically how we've dealt with display home applications before, and perhaps a question through the chair to the Director of Infrastructure and Development. Will this create any issues or challenges when the home does eventually become when the house eventually becomes a home for someone and becomes a residential property and its use changes? Will the purchasers of the home or the seller of the home need to go through the process of having the use changed, or will this be something that resolves itself?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Shire President. There will be no change whatsoever required for those homeowners when they move in and purchase the property.
Thank you very much for the response. I mean, as I said, I have no objections at all to a display home centre in Dalyellup. I think they have been a part of that community since its beginning. They're not quite as common as they once were, but they are very important to drawing people into the community. And you know, as someone who made a television program for Channel 9 for many years about selling homes, I know just how important it is to, you know, to sell people this dream of living in a home and living in a community, and it's an important part of growing the community. So, yeah, support the officer's recommendation.
Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, I think it's a pretty straightforward motion that we're accepting here. The reason that we have these changes in display homes is things change as time goes in, so people want to see the new product. So yeah, and it's close to where the houses would be built. So I'd like to put the motion to the vote.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's carried 7-1. Item 14.2, potential review of land use permissibility in the Shire of Capel Local Planning Scheme 8, Priority Agricultural Zone. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terrentroy. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Understanding obviously the contentious issue around the use type, you know, what the initial report was investigating was an amendment to a planning scheme number 8, which has not yet been, still being gazetted. So I think the item that's before us ultimately is just common sense that we can't amend something that hasn't been finished yet, so or hasn't been adopted yet. So I don't think there's anything more to it.
Councillor Terrentroy. Are there any other speakers? Question, Councillor McCleary.
My question relates around the definition of intensive land use in priority agricultural zones. It's some ways building a shed and housing with a whole lot of animals and things like that sounds more like a factory than it does intensive farming, and I'm wondering whether the definition of what's used in looking at this clearly gives an understanding of what intensive is in an agricultural sense. Is it animals on that land, or is it animals like, you know, battery hens or something like that away from the farm? So that's kind of question. It's probably a question that can't be answered straight away.
Yeah, without the definitions in front of me, I couldn't answer that. But under our local planning scheme, there are 3 different animal agricultural pursuits. Animal husbandry intensive is one of them, as well as agriculture intensive and extensive. And they've both got various definitions, and in some cases animal rearing does fall under the other 2 categories rather than animal husbandry intensive. But without those definitions, I couldn't tell you exactly what pursuits. The Director, is there any further comment might be added to that? Or the Chief Executive Officer? Oh no, the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Mr. President. Generally, an intensive agricultural use looks at the stocking rates being much higher than a standard rural pursuit. I don't have the definition in front of me, but that would be the standard densities of the stocking rates would be what would set them apart from the standard rural pursuit.
Thank you, Director. Anything further, Councillor? Is that?
I don't think my question's going to get answered, and I think it's probably a WAPC answer that I'm seeking. rather than round the table here, because
The definitions are the model definitions, so they come from the WA Planning Commission. Yep. Right. Did you have anything further, Councillor? No. Any other speakers? Councillor Tarantroy?
I have concerns about this motion, even though I seconded it. I'm always concerned about intensive farming on a floodplain district, and I feel they're not suitable for land for the landscape if it is within an area of the floodplain, because I'm concerned about the contamination of local waterways, and I've spoken about this previously at council meetings. I'm concerned about the creeks, streams and rivers, and these waterways feed into Geograph Bay, which will affect our coastal ecosystems. So I am concerned about the risk of of intensive farming byproducts like excrement from animals, and also other biosecurity issues such as Johne's disease. So I'll be voting against this motion. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Noonan?
Question, if I may, Mr. President.
Yes.
Can we have multiple zones, and can those zones be just the extent of one lot? For example, if I had a marron farm, could that be classified as an intensive zone without affecting any other neighbouring properties?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Councillor. You can't have two zones, but you can have additional uses on zones that are approved in addition to a zoning requirement. So that would be the only way that you could almost duplicate or have two uses on a site.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, I think I might just add something to hopefully completely answer the councillor's question as I understand it. The other thing is, with a local planning scheme and a town planning scheme, you're generally looking at broad areas. Where you get down to looking at planning on an individual lot by lot basis, you're normally talking about the next level down and the next level down of planning documents, whether or not that, you know, be a local area plan or something like that. So normally at town planning scheme level or local planning scheme level, you're dealing with broad sort of areas. The next layers down of our planning documentation would tend to try and deal with things sort of on a much more lot by lot basis, but not necessarily at this level.
Thank you, Mr. President, Director and CEO. So I suppose my concern is that if we were to support this motion tonight, we wouldn't inadvertently create difficulty for any intensive farming operations that currently exist.
No.
On single lots or
no.
Okay.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Sciano, do you wish to close?
Nothing further to add.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's carried 7-1. We now move to 14.3, Amendment to Existing Extractive Industry, Lot 2, Callan Up Road, Jallurup. Is there a mover? Councillor McCleary? Are you moving the officer's recommendation, or you're moving the alternative officer's recommendation? Yes? And is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon? Councillor McCleary?
Thank you, Mr. President. I've read through all the documents, and heard all the other arguments with this. This is kind of a change in process, and I think there's been a lot of work done in the background with the staff and a third-party environmental group that I understand has come up with a method of rehabilitation in the concerned areas of 1 and 4. That's a pretty important outcome. I think also when we look at extractive industries in general, where we're getting a finite resource and being able to extract more out of a pit rather than opening up something else is also a positive in that area. I also like that the staff and through the mediation we've come up with a better bonding process to ensure that we've got coverage to deal with the outcomes of if it doesn't turn out like it is. And so you kind of want to notice that you really need to work on this, and it's kind of a process where the players need to show success, and I'm hoping they in every endeavour they make every effort to come out with a good outcome with this decision. So I'm going to vote for this change, simply because there's been a lot of work done in the background and through the mediation process.
Councillor Dillon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Look, I'm of a like mind of Councillor McCleary. I believe that we should be trying to make the most of our resources that we currently have working. A lot of our remaining resources in the Shire are covered by natural vegetation. If we want to save our natural vegetation, we need to look at ways to better utilise the open resources. One thing that was made pretty clear by the officers in various briefings was if we do go to a 1 in 4, we're going to require more effort, more resources and more money to make sure that they're adequately rehabilitated down the track. We're going to keep those bonds for longer to make sure they're done properly, and we're going to look at maybe putting on somebody to assess the rehabilitation that the Shire's seeking. So while it might be a bit of a change to certain people, and I know some people might be a bit nervous about moving from 1 in 6 to 1 in 4, I think it's something we probably need to look at. It seems to have been researched thoroughly by a third party who apparently have great credentials in the field. They believe it can be done, and I believe the council should move that way. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I really appreciate all the work the staff has done and that the applicant has done. I believe that they're sincere in their desire to present a rehabilitation plan that does work. However, we have the highest rate of one of the highest rates of clearing on the Swan Coastal Plain. Councillor Dillon's quite right to make the point that we need to protect the limited amount of natural vegetation that is remaining for natural habitat. We've got critically endangered species in this Shire, both flora and fauna. I think and the point that Donna Brown made earlier, and I thank Michael Tichborne as well for the questions, the point that they made, the fact that this has been asked and this has been put before the council since the 1990s, show us one example where your rehabilitation plan has worked, just one. And no extractive industry in the Shire can do that. And that's after, so they've been on notice for 25 years. They've been on notice for 25 years and they have failed so far to do that. Now, this question that this motion that we look at tonight doesn't really matter tonight. It doesn't matter tonight for tomorrow. What it matters for is in 25 years, the next time this comes up. Okay, and where state governments then start looking at the remaining vegetation, native vegetation, you know, after we've exhausted absolutely everything, that all the farmland that's been cleared, and then they'll start looking at, you know, the last little bit of native forest that's in the Shire. And in 25 years, if we haven't got any examples of vegetation which has been rehabilitated, there is nowhere for the endangered species and for the orchids and flora to go. You can't just create offsets. Well, we've got offsets. And it's this big paddock, and we're going to plant 1,000 trees in it. It doesn't work like that. You know, for cockatoos, they need trees to be at least 100 years old to be big enough to have hollows in them. Similarly, for the flora and fauna, they need trees which are mature trees in order to provide sufficient habitat and foraging for them to survive. So show me one example. Show me one example where either a private contractor can do it or where we can do it. Okay? We have to take on that mantle, and in 25 years, then come back in 25 years. Okay? Come back in 25 years with this same motion, and if you can show us one example where it's worked, then I'll be happy to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any speakers for the motion? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I just have a question through the chair, either to the CEO or to Mrs. Gillett. I was under the impression that there wasn't actually any clearing involved with this application, that the land was effectively already cleared, and that all we were doing was adjusting the batter slopes. Is that correct?
That's my interpretation, but the Director of Infrastructure, I'll get that on record.
Thanks, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct.
Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Terrantroy.
I'm all for preserving our native forests, and I think that I appreciate all of the hard work that the Shire officers have done with this. They've put in bonds where we didn't have bonds before. This is an area that's already been cleared, and it's not clearing any more native forests to get more resources out. I think approximately $70,000 per hectare is, when you're looking at the staged, I mean, it's in a staged way, but if you even it out, it works out to around $70,000 per hectare to rehabilitate. So that means that if the applicant does not rehabilitate, then we've got this bond that we can do something with, and we can use that money to plant native species. So because we're not clearing any more native forest or trees or areas, I think I'm for this motion. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of those very difficult ones, because when anything comes back from SAT to make a consideration contrary to the one that we sent to SAT, you always have to have a very deep conversation with yourself about what it is we're doing. Now, I, for one, I think when this item came to council, what I first say is, am I happy with 1 to 4 slopes? No. am I happy with the precedent that it sets? No. My concern is the leg that we don't have to stand on when it comes from a planning provision. Ultimately, and it's been already mentioned tonight, we do not have this clearly in our local law. I think we refused this on the basis that staff were, with the knowledge that they had and what they had at the time, and having not seen example of this before, council was not confident that it could be achieved. We've gone through this process with SAT. For it to have come back now, and the amount of work that's been done by the external consultant and the staff, and what's been presented back to council, and the additional increase in the bonds, given the lack of direction within our planning frameworks, I don't think we have much of a leg to stand on in this case. And to have it come back like this, I mean, the alternative recommendation, the clarity on that, and obviously, and the inclusion of J, the 2 metre separation, the maximum groundwater levels, and the restrictions, and the clear restrictions on vehicle movements are an improvement. Now, but off the basis, I mean, ultimately, I think it raises a very good conversation that needs to be, it raises the point that the conversation needs to be had around what our planning framework does look like and what our extractive industry local law does look like in the future. And, I would like to see the Shire be able to be in a position to debate at that level that we shouldn't be going any further than a 1.6 batter slope. But I think the applicant through this process and the external consultant have been able to demonstrate that this is possible. It comes with an additional cost. That cost has been worked into the recommendation that is before us, with the increase, I think, from 20-odd thousand per hectare to 60-odd thousand per hectare, the rehabilitation bond. So I think what we've got here is ultimately, I think, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation tonight. I think if this goes back to SAT, they'll endorse it for us. So, thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Sciano. I don't like the 1 in 4 batter slopes. I too am concerned about the precedent that this will set. But I will support this motion tonight for 2 reasons: the independent environmental report and the fact that the land is already cleared. If it wasn't for those 2 factors, I would not be supporting this. And I agree with Seb, if there was something that we can do to shore up our local laws to make the 1 in 6 batter slopes legal, and that's our planning framework, I would very much prefer that as well. But given the amount of work that has gone into it, like I said, the information that's contained in the independent environmental report, the increased bonds, and the fact the land is already cleared, I will support this tonight.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor, a question? Yes? Just do a microphone, Councillor.
Just a question, if I may, Mr. President. With the bonds, the table of bonds, okay, it's got the extraction stage and it's got total bond per stage.
Yes.
Am I right in assuming that that it is a total bond, so that once they get up to stage 4 and the $70,000, $70,919, when they proceed to stage 5, do we actually give back some of that? So, or are they cumulative? So they give 10,000 for stage 2, 47,000 for stage 3, an additional 70,000 for stage 4, and so on.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, just for clarification, so the different amounts that are reflected there in the recommendation use the same per hectare rate. They're just representative of different cells within the extractive industry area in different areas. So that's where we come up with the different numbers. And effectively what we're going to see is a rolling kind of taking of bonds and a release of bonds over time. Taking of bonds when the applicant moves on to different stages of excavating the existing area from 1 in 6 to 1 in 4. And then separately, this graduated release of bonds when it can be demonstrated that the rehabilitation implementation plan has been delivered. So we're going to have a rolling taking and releasing process over an extended period of time.
Anything further? No, the only thing I'll add then, if I can, my turn. I agree quite substantially with the comments of the Deputy President, but the ones that really resonate with me are from Councillor Andrew. It's for those two reasons that I'm supporting this, because it is an already cleared site. But the other thing that I've also decided I'll support this, because I'm not happy with the 1 in 4 either. I don't like the standard that sets. The other reason I'm supportive of this is because while the Shire is the one who's had to engage the external consultant at a cost to us, the proponent of this extractive industry has actually stepped up, come forward and tried to prove things. And yes, while I'm worried about the precedent it sets about future extractive industries also wanting to go 1 in 4, I think the onus will be on, we're not going to show you how to do it, you're going to prove to us how to do it. And what this is a professional plan going forward on how to rehabilitate this, so I don't think it's going to allow Joe Bloggs with his pit out the back to come forward and just, I'll just chuck it back to a paddock when I'm finished. I don't think that's going to fly anymore, but we do need to strengthen that local planning policy around these batters, because I don't like going less than the 2 metres close to the water table, and I don't really like going steeper than the 1 in 6. So this will be the experiment, I suppose, and because it's a pre-existing site, I think it's probably the most appropriate one, but we will have to strengthen our planning policies going forward regarding it. All right, if there are no further speakers, I'll ask Councillor McCleary to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's, I can see where everyone's coming from, and it's true. There's the clearing is mostly done. I would also point out that in the environmental reports attached to it, there's no endangered species that were identified in this this area. There's also quite an extensive, and I think a really good positive out of this is that we've probably set the goalpost now for how an environmental management plan and rehabilitation should be done with the extractive industry. So we've kind of got a higher goalpost there now and a mark on it. What 1 in 6, 1 in 4? I think this is an opportunity to put to bed once and for all whether it's achievable or not, and that can be an argument going forward when we have future debates about extractive industries. I think that's all, and I just think we'll put this to the vote now.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour and those against, and that's carried 6-2.
The Shire President has written the declaration of interest for item 14.4, tender 22-10, Boyanup West, the widening of Boyanup West Road. Proximity interest that has been cited, and so I will take the chair as he's required to leave the room. Item 14.4, do I have someone to move that? Councillor McCleary, and a seconder? Councillor Tarrant-Troy. Councillor McCleary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got to start with a question, if I may. In item 2 of the recommendation, it's shifting, taking money from a second coat reseal from Boyne-up Road West and something from Merton Road, and I know there's bigger items in the council. Does that timing get shifted, or are they identified as savings? And
I'm going to defer that one to the CEO to answer, if I can. Oh, sorry, I'm going to refer that to the director.
Thank you. That they will be deferred. They won't be cancelled. So, yes, we'll push those to the Boyne-up Road West second coat reseal and the Merton Road reseal back. They won't be cancelled off the program completely. Yes.
Have you finished your contribution, Councillor McCleary?
I'll continue on because
You can
that was a
continue.
question that got answered for me. In moving the motion, I move it as read now because that's what I wanted that clarity for. We've got a grant approved through the Regional Roads Board. This is more about the amount that we contribute, and it's quite a substantial amount that we're getting in. It's a sign of the times that costs are going up, and we need to address that somewhere, and I think this is responsible by setting priorities, by moving other items out and keeping a constraint on the budgets. So we're still keeping within our budget limits, and it's a good outcome, sort of, but we've got other things that are going to be delayed, which I drove along Merton Road. I think that's quite feasible. I haven't driven along the second coat seal on Boyne-up Road West, but look, I think this is a good option.
Thank you, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Terrantroy, do you have speaker as a second?
Just to say that I think if we delay this further, it will end up costing us more, and we're already at 197,135,000, which is 37% above the estimated cost already for the works. So if we delay it any further, it's going to cost our residents and our shire more. So yeah, I'm for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the item? Does anyone speak for the item? No? Seeing as I don't have any other speakers, unless Councillor McCleary, unless you'd like to close debate? Yeah, close debate. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. We'll grab the Shire President and I'll vacate the chair.
Okay, Community and Corporate Reports 15.1, New Council Policy, Work Health and Safety, WHS. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Terrantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Terrantroy.
As a council, we're just requested to endorse this work health and safety policy, and it is pivotal and necessary to protect the Shire volunteers, staff and people within the Shire. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor Terrantroy, you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.2, Policy Review, Fair Value of Assets. Is there a mover? Councillor Sciano. A seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, these are it's a relatively simple update to the policy. One thing I did notice was the move from 3 to 5 years, with the requirement, if need so, for an annual desktop review. I mean, this is one of those situations where I don't think there's particularly an issue in that space, and if staff are obviously looking to do the 5-year review with the ability to do the desktop once a year, then by all means that's fine. So don't have particularly much to say on this policy, so I'll leave it there.
Councillor Terrantroy, are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor McCleary.
I think this is, I'm going to support the motion. This policy represents appropriate asset management strategies to ensure long-term financial planning outcomes. As indicated in the policy, it also feeds into the ratio calculations that are used in annual financial reporting, and this will give direction when assets require replacing and appropriate financing included in budgets going forward. So I think this is a good adjustment through the planning process.
Are there any other speakers? Okay. Councillor Sciani, wish to close?
Close debate.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 15.3, Policy Review, Community Engagement. Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I move as read and support the officer's recommendation and the staff do for our community.
Thank you, Councillor. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this policy really just does is updated in regard to the community engagement framework, which we had come before council not long ago. So, again, this is a very simple review of the policy. There's really a couple of paragraph change here and just, direction to the community engagement framework, which has come before council. So I don't think there's particularly anything serious here.
Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Terrantroy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the whole point of this policy and the few little tweaks and changes is basically to support the 5-step community participation plan, which is to inform, consult, involve, collaborate and empower the community to be a part of the decisions that happen within the Shire. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.4, the financial statements for the 31st of August 2022. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Andrew. A seconder, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Andrew. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice there's a couple of good pointers in there, and I think it's hats off to everyone in the room that the early adoption of the budget and preparations of that has seen a strong cash position in the middle of the thing. It's on about page 11. No, it can't be 11. 111. Yeah, I highlighted a few things there. Some of the concerns in there, the interest rates aren't as good as what we were expecting, but I imagine where interest rates are going up, we'll probably see some improvements in that going forward. Better than a return of 2.26%. And associated with that, we're going to have increased costs. But as always, this report's quite comprehensive, and that's it.
Are there any speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Andrew, do you wish to close? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.5, the accounts paid during the month of September 2022. Is there a mover for those accounts? Councillor Dillon. A seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor Dillon.
No, just as presented, thanks, Mr. President.
Councillor Tarantroy.
I did note that there was an increase in the cost of renting or hiring the deposit on the cat traps from 100 to 150, but that's because they've become more expensive to source. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Dillon, do you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 15.6, delegation review, temporary road closure. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Sciano. A seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. The main issue here is that obviously when you're trying to manage major works on roads, having a delegation of 4 weeks can often be quite a challenge. So obviously revoking, funnily enough, it actually kind of, 116 kind of repeats what's in 111. And then I think revoking delegation 111 and then changing 116 to remove that 4-week parameter. But I mean, the detail of it is in the attachment, which basically lines out what the process would be, and it typically says that if a road closure was needing to occur for quite a long period of time, that it would have to come to council. So I think this is just, we trust our CEO to be able to make these decisions, but we also, we need our organisation to be able to get the work done. So that's what we're trying to do here with this delegation to clean this up, is we've just got to let the organisation get the work done. So happy to endorse the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Tarantroy.
Yeah, this is all about efficiency and allowing the CEO to have greater efficiency in the business process of the everyday operations of road closures for upgrades and stuff. And 4 weeks is just too short a time to keep bringing it back to council. Thank you. I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Question, Councillor Andrew.
Is the time accumulative? So could the CEO approve road closures for time periods of, for example, 3-week increments before it comes back to council? Those time periods, are they accumulative, or he can just continually authorise them to be closed, for example, 3 weeks at a time? I don't feel like I explained that very well.
I think I understand what you're saying. My interpretation of condition 4 of the thing would be anything that exceeds 6 months, whether it was accumulative or not, would mean it would have to come to council. But for clarification, I'll get the CEO to clarify that point.
Thank you, Shire President. The intent, look, there's a national standard framework to follow in terms of temporary road closures, and the absolute intent would be to follow that. The other intent would be to approve a temporary road closure as a one-off basis for a set period of time to complete a set amount of work that, in all likelihood, in most cases, has already been approved by council. The only time that I would envisage that there may be a change to that initial period is if there was an overrun of the period that was needed to complete the work. So we might approve a road construction program and a temporary road closure because of that for, say, a period of 12 weeks, and an additional 2 or 4 weeks was required to complete the work. But it would not be the intention to just continually roll on with an extended period of road closures for the same purpose.
I think just another part for that question, if those additions to work added up to 6 months, would you then bring it to council? Is that the other part of your question, councillor?
Yeah, so that was my question. So if they had an approval to close it for 18 weeks and then something happened and they requested another 18 weeks, which takes us over the 6-month mark, for that additional 18-week request, would that have to come back to council or could you sign it off?
If ultimately the second period of temporary closure would take it over that 6-month mark, then it would be outside the delegation, would have to come back to council.
Anything further, councillor? No. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Sciano, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's just worth adding in there as well, just with the conditions to the delegation. You know, the initial condition is actually still the 4 weeks, and then if it is to be more than 4 weeks, there's a few more steps that have to be followed. So there's local public knowledge notice, written notification provided to affected landholders and the stakeholders, and then the invitation and consideration of submissions as well. So I think it's already kind of been said. This is just really streamlines the process and is very much in line with what a lot of our neighbours do as well. So,
with that, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. There is no new business of an urgent nature, so move to item 17, public question time. Are there any public questions? No, we'll move on to item 18, motions of notice, absolute majority of council. There are none. Item 19, notices of motion for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the council. None. We now move to item 20, consideration of items behind closed doors. So there's an officer's recommendation there that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with the Shire of Capel Standing Orders Local Law 2016. 12.1G to consider the confidential item. Is there a mover? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Dillon. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. We'll close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Oh, yep, all right. I'll Okay, just wait for council and, yeah. Okay, now that the meeting has returned from behind closed doors, I can say that the decision that council took was that the council authorises the chief executive officer to initiate legal proceedings against the licensee of an extractive industry for breaches of both the Planning and Development Act 2005 and the Shire's Extractive Industry Local Law 2016, and that was carried unanimous. There being no further business on tonight's agenda, I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:10 p.m. Thank you very much.